Absolutely electric transition we got going on there. I'm ready to run through a brick wall, Dwayne, just like your RB1 and utilization upgrades is this week. Kenneth Walker, the reigning sitting RB3 in all fantasy football. Talk about what you've seen from him beyond the production and what makes him someone that you are upgrading up the ranks.
Yeah, look, I mean, you had 33.6 fantasy points from Mr. Walker in week 4, and then you look up at halftime and you only have 2 carries, from the guy in week 5. A little bit disturbing, Ian, but man, as we dig more into the numbers and look at what he was able to do, this was in a game script where they threw the ball all the time and it didn't impact his snaps. Last year in this sort of game script, it was Zach Charbonnet getting more of the work. It was Kenneth Walker coming off the field. So if we look at the 2-minute offense, which is whenever we know the team is in a passing mode, Ian, over the first 3 games, 100% of the snaps went to Kenneth Walker in week 1. Then we saw 53% in week 2, and then this last week, 95%. So he's out there most of the time when they're in these true passing situations. And what that does, that unlocks him. That means that it doesn't matter what kind of game script we get. Seahawks want to go run heavy. We know they're feeding Kenneth Walker. We've already seen what that can look like. They want to go pass heavy, or the game script forces them to go pass heavy. It's okay. He's going to be on the field. And that's how he came through last week. He still scored you 14.6 fantasy points in a PPR because he was on the field to catch some balls to save the day. And that keeps him from being, a super volatile asset. And with that, right now, his utilization score is up to an 8.9 in. I'll be honest, it would be more like a 9.5. The main thing holding him down is the overall volume. Because don't look now, the Seahawks are the most pass-happy team in the league, a 10% drop-back rate over expectation. Ooh. Guys, all that does, that compares the Seahawks to all the other teams in the NFL over the last 3 years playing in similar situations. It does it at a snap level. So looking at the situation that the Seahawks have been in, they're throwing the ball way more than a typical NFL team does. So that's the one thing really holding him back from moving into my top 3. But right now, man, he is locked in as a mid-range running back 1. If I were drafting today, which you guys could do over on Underdog if you want to do the resurrection draft over in Best Ball, he's going behind these guys. I would take him in front of all of them, Ian. Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook. Give me Kenneth Walker over all those guys. He's a mid-range running back 1.
Sounds like he's the RB1 the rest of the way, right? Who would you take ahead of him?
I would still take Derrick Henry ahead of him. I would still take Alvin Kamara ahead of him. I would still take, there was one other name I was looking at yesterday. Saquon. Yeah, Saquon Barkley. So I have him at 5. I had him at 5. So there's 3 or 4 names that I would take over him, but I could certainly see a situation where you would want to take Kenneth Walker first. Like, I wouldn't blame anybody. He's young. Like, he's looked terrific, man. Like, when they do feed him on the ground, I don't know that any running back in the game looks more explosive right now. He's really settled into his skill set. So a player that's not leaving the field, man, we love him.
Really is that pass down usage that has changed things. We've known he's always good with the football in his hands. Last year, 67% of the Seahawks rush attempts. This year, he's at 70%, but that route rate, 30% last year, up to 54% this year. Gotta love that. And again, gotta love what our old friend, the sheesh MVP of the week, if you will, DeAndre Swift has been doing over these past 2 weeks, Dwayne. More PPR points and total yards than any running back not named Derrick Henry. And accordingly, getting a nice little upgrade in your ranks.
Yeah, I mean, in Swift, we knew he had the utilization over the first 3 games, but the fantasy points haven't followed. And the utilization score accounts for that. We actually want production on your opportunities, but it was still telling us, guys, like, he still really has a chance to be this running back too. And now we've got these 2 games in our back pocket, Ian, and it really does look like that's the case. Now, obviously, over the last 2 games, he looks like a running back 1, 29.5 fantasy points and 20 fantasy points. But it's just a reminder, right? And I wrote it up in the utilization report, Ian, example 4,738 of why we shouldn't overreact to just the first couple of games and a sample. We want to pay attention to them, but the overreactions were too big. And I was guilty of that. Like, I pushed DeAndre Swift down to like a low-end running back 3. I normally take these guys through a slower process. I think I just got defeated with writing about him each week and telling people to keep starting him. And he was blowing up in people's line. When I say blowing up, I mean dudding in people's lineups. And so I felt the pressure of that. And really, I should have worked him through my normal process, which is he's still getting most of the work. We can kind of push him down because the production hasn't been there yet. But until they show us they're going away from him, you got to kind of keep ranking him in that same spot. And so I ran all the numbers on this, Ian. Here are the range of outcomes on DeAndre Swift based on his utilization score. And this is all based on the fantasy thing, on the things that matter the most for future fantasy production, guys. So we've done the research and we put it all together. Low end running back 1 finish, a 29% chance. So 1 and 3, basically. You could have a low-end running back 1 on your hands right now with DeAndre Swift based on his comps over history. If you look at the guys that have been a high-end running back 2 or a low-end running back 2, 35% and 24%. So to me, the way you can use that information, Ian, is, okay, if you can trade for DeAndre Swift as a running back 2, like, you should do it because you have the upside of still getting a running back 1. If you're trading him away, though, like, you shouldn't be trading him as a running back 3. You have to make sure that you're getting that high-end running back 2 value from him. So we've started implementing this information into the utilization report. If you guys want to go check it out, you're going to see it a lot more often. You can go over to the site. It's all free over at fantasylife.com.
Certainly looks like the good times should keep rolling matchups against the Jaguars, Commanders, and Cardinals across these next 3 games. Funny how, the number 1 overall pick starting to play like the number 1 overall pick starts to, lift the rest of that offense as well. So again, guys, those were the big 2 utilization upgrades